BlackkKlansman, directed by Spike Lee, is a biographical drama film that takes place in 1970s Colorado Springs, where a man by the name of Ron Stallworth is desperate to prove himself within the Colorado Springs Police Department. Ron eventually becomes a detective, where he works undercover with Adam Driver's character Flip to infiltrate the local chapter of the white supremacist group known as the Ku Klux Klan. Ron calls the white supremacist and pretends to be a white supremacist himself named Ron Stallworth, and Flip actually attends events under that name. As the two try to infiltrate the KKK and tear them down, things get very dangerous for both of them. Alright, so I've been meaning to see BlackkKlansman for a while now. It's been getting a lot of rave reviews and a lot of buzz, and I'm actually a big fan personally of Adam Driver's, so he's probably mostly what drew me to go see this one in theaters. I've never actually seen another Spike Lee movie, but I do know a lot of people really love his work, so that probably played into it a little bit for me as well. I like BlackkKlansman a lot ultimately. I don't think it's quite best picture good, but it's certainly one of the best films to come out this year thus far. I don't think this one will make my top 10 list at the end of the year because Oscar season hasn't really kicked in yet and we haven't hit a lot of the great films yet, but I think this is a very good film with a lot going for it. I think BlackkKlansman is a very good, very well-rounded film that certainly succeeds in a handful of different areas at a high level. Firstly, I think the story is very well put together. It's paced well, the characters are interesting, and the story feels genuine to its source material, the memoirs of the real Ron Stallworth himself. This story feels like an honest telling of events that led to some even more odd and unlikely defeats of evil. The film dedicates a lot of time showing you how dangerous and just purely awful these white supremacists are, how they're motivated by hatred for anyone of a different race, anyone that's different than them. But at the same time, they're decently well organized and skeptical of anyone who may prove damaging to their cause. The story gets odd because the way the detectives actually infiltrate the KKK chapter is kind of remarkably bad. So bad that the villains never truly considered it as a possibility because it just made no logical sense. That's where a lot of the humor comes in, something else that BlackkKlansman does fairly well. I'm not going to say this is a hilarious film or anything like that, but there certainly are scenes that are pretty funny and sort of lighten the mood every now and then. What's interesting though is that a lot of this humor feels very Tarantino-like. A lot of the movie does actually, a way less violent Tarantino film. It's just comfortable poking fun at taboo subject matter like racism, and it does so in a way that feels sort of awkwardly lighthearted. It's in stark contrast with the more serious tones that resonate more deeply and more often, but it actually does provide a nice change of pace overall. John David Washington and Adam Driver both do a nice job of being funny, but also being dramatic as well. The versatility carries the movie quite a bit because they're asked to show off different skill sets at different times, and it all works super well. John David Washington and Adam Driver actually do a lot of the heavy lifting here. John David Washington handles the lead duties for the first act, and then as the film progresses, sort of becomes like a co-lead situation where he and Adam Driver share the responsibilities and share the spotlight. They both have tons of great moments, and while I don't think either of these performances are ultimately going to be Academy-nominated performances, they're both still really good. Some of the best I've seen this year thus far. I've only ever seen John David Washington in the HBO show Ballers where he plays a supporting character, but I have a feeling he's going to start landing some bigger roles after his great work in this movie. Adam Driver is just continuing to impress me more and more with each passing film. In fact, I think he's getting better with each passing film. This time around he plays a character with a subtlety and nuance that works very well in conjunction with John David Washington's performance that's a little more in your face, but still awesome. Speaking of subtlety and nuance, I think this is one area where BlackkKlansman could probably improve. I felt locked in for a lot of the film, really engaged to the setting and the oddball nature of the story and the hopeful downfall of this local KKK chapter they're showing us. Where the film took me out of the experience though, is when it comes across as if it's trying too hard to say something meaningful about issues we face in today's climate. I think there probably was a way to do this a little more subtly, a little more naturally, but sadly that's just not Spike Lee's style at points in this film. There's moments where I felt sucked out of the immersive aspects because I just felt the director's political end goals too clearly present in the source material. It feels less like a movie at that point and more like a political lecture, which is something that I'm personally not really looking for out of a movie-going experience. If you can weave it in naturally to the story, then more power to you, that's great. But if you're forceful about it, it just kind of kills the immersion when it happens. Something else Spike Lee does here that bothered me a bit was a seemingly intentional means of editing that's choppy. There's at times a lack of continuity between cuts, especially when 2 or 3 characters are just talking to one another, and there's even a method where text is used in a way that feels out of sync with the rest of the film. The editing is perfectly fine oftentimes, but it's sometimes just awkward, and that's another place where the immersion suffers a bit because of that. It seems like an artistic decision because it's done in deliberate moments to add a sort of awkward charm to the 70s style film, but it just feels off. The editing choices aren't always the greatest with this one. That said, there are a lot of things I really liked about BlackkKlansman, and I do think it has a very powerful message. The message to me was that racism is real, and that it evolves and changes over time to take new forms as society changes and evolves itself. I also took away that racism and hatred can lead to isolation on both sides. This kind of division only creates more division and more animosity between people that shouldn't ever feel any of those things towards each other simply because of the color of their skin. This was an extremely tumultuous time for African Americans especially, and in response, many of them felt the need to defend themselves. It's a natural reaction and it makes sense if you feel threatened. But I think the film tries to sort of point out how both sides just retreat further and further into their own sides and just hate each other with the gap that widens even further day by day. There's just a lot to digest here, and it's mostly insightful and effective. Overall, though, I found BlackkKlansman to be a very good film, certainly one of the better ones I've seen this year. I don't think it's quite going to make it to the Oscar discussion, but you never know. It has a powerful enough message that it just might. As for the pros cons, for the pros, I thought BlackkKlansman delivered a well-rounded and unique historical story, lots of insightful commentary on important topics, 2 great leading performances, and some nice humor that balances the entire experience. As for the cons, I found the film lacked subtlety in certain key spots, and its editing choices weren't the greatest. I'm still going to give BlackkKlansman a 9 out of 10 because I think the pros outweigh the cons here. If you're interested in a historical drama film with a quality message, this is a good choice. So did you guys see BlackkKlansman yet? What did you think of it? And if not, let me know why not. And also let me know the movie you're most looking forward to that's coming out in 2018. I'll drop mine in the comments below because I honestly got to think long and hard about that one. Either way, this is WillFoxification signing off. See you in the next review.